Hello, good people in New York City and beyond. My name is Adam Shaper, and this is Freelance Fiends presents Sounds Familiar, the podcast where I talk to the denizens of New York nightlife about their art, about their desires, about their drives, and how they survive in the big city. Thank you so much to all the folks that checked out the very first episode, and many thanks to Ann Courtney of Mother Feather for joining me for that one. The response has been good, and I've been working pretty hard all week since then to make sure that it's available on every single podcasting platform I could think of. So again, many thanks to all the folks who took a listen. Thanks to Ann for getting that out there and for sitting down with me. And my guests this week are Cinema. That's Ev Gold and Paul Claro, Brooklyn-born cousins who make up the heavy experimental duo. We met up over the summer to talk about growing up in South Brooklyn, playing gigs in what's known these days as Old New York, how formats have changed over the years, and of course their favorite music, because that's what I'm here to talk about, man. Since their formation in 2008, Cinema have played nearly 500 live shows, including half a dozen European tours and an opening slot for Black Flag's 2014 North American tour. They've also released a handful of albums, including the latest CCXMD, produced by Vin Sin of Electric Plant Studios in Brooklyn, New York. The album came out on November 1st on Nefarious Industries. They're currently, today, they're heading out on tour of the West Coast through November. Tour dates can be found at cinemaband.com/booking. Now, this new record, there's a lot of things being said about it. I'm just going to read you a couple things. You'll see these in the show notes as well. POPMatters says Cinema showed themselves as a brooding, multi-faceted monster that is relentless in its pursuit of musical mastery. Sonic Abuse says this very clearly is music of niche appeal, designed to flout convention and explore the outer limits of what can be achieved by an art rock collective. I really enjoy people pushing boundaries. And the chaos can be liberating as much as it can warp the senses. This recording either represents a snapshot of the specific moment of an artistic statement or ties them to a blueprint that they have to take with them. So we talk about their favorite music. We talk at length about kind of what it was like to play in Brooklyn. These cousins are 10 years apart in age. So one grew up during the 90s, one came of age in the early aughts, middle aughts. So they had not very different experiences, but somewhat different experiences in their kind of little enclaves in South Brooklyn. So I've talked to these guys quite a bit before. Check in the show notes. You can see I was on the road an hour with them a couple times. They've been on my show, the old show as well, Old Time Religion. And they're great guys to talk to. They're very easy to talk to. They're a lot of fun, and they are New York through and through. So without further ado, please meet Ev Gold and Paul Claro, Cinema.
Okay. It's nice to see you.
So much clarity.
Oh, we have Slack.
A little bit. How about
We have Slack.
Dude looks like a lady.
When you start doing your
Dude looks like a lady.
Can you get some of that?
oh, that's in there now.
Okay.
All right.
Thank God.
Hey guys, Ev and Paul, Cinema. Hello. How are you?
Hello.
Just roll with it. Just go with it.
Hello.
Thank you guys so much for coming out. I interviewed you a couple years ago, and as we were just talking about, had a little technical difficulty because my dumbass left the air conditioning on.
He was trying to be a nice man.
It was
trying to treat us to a little cool.
I put it up there.
temperatures.
I'm kind of a perfectionist in a way, but I was like, oh well, I gotta put it out there. So there it is with all the buzzing and hissing. Hopefully we avoid that this time.
Buzzing and hissing is something we are closely associated with in cinema.
Ev's signature sound.
Yeah, my pedal board has enough buzz and hiss to chase everybody away, so it's quite all right.
I say the same thing about the inside of my head. Actually, it's very, very, very buzzy in there. So this is a podcast about music and about New York City, and you guys are quintessential New York City. Grew up here, as I recall.
Yes.
And down in the area that I'm not as familiar with, kind of the southeast of Brooklyn. Is that correct? Is that right from what I remember?
I would say if you were to look at a map of Brooklyn, it is the southeast area of Brooklyn that we're from.
Everything.
Check our Wikipedia. Maybe it'll tell you.
We could be.
It's where all the sailors are, from what I understand. Is that correct? Everything's called Sheep's Kill, or the Sheep's Head.
Sheep's Head, yeah.
Yeah, it's like Horse Kill.
Yeah, Sheep's Head Bay, and there's a God.
There's a beach that's like I don't know. It's like a mass murderer, serial killer beach. It's like Horsekill, right?
It's like Horseshoe Bay is over there somewhere.
I've never heard of Horseshoe Bay.
I went. It's right across the street from the home you grew up in. Oh, that's what was sold to me, I believe. as a child on a trip in 4th grade.
We'll talk more about New York in a second.
Sure.
But what's the song that you started your day with? How did you start your day? It could have been something. Did you turn on the radio? Did you pop something onto your Spotify, which I do not endorse? But however you did it. What was the music you started your day with today?
Well, today was I do start music every day. I start my day with a bit of music. This is Ev, by the way, tuning in. And today I started off actually. And this isn't just to do like a plug of our own stuff. I don't wake up every morning, look myself in the face, and listen to my own song. But we just
slowly putting lipstick on in the mirror. Yeah.
We've just started recording.
Can we curse on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
You gotta always check.
So we're in the midst of doing a new recording project. So the first thing I listened to this morning was a bit of this recording project that involves us and some collaborators. So after I finished listening to that, the first thing I did listen to on Apple Music, because I don't peruse Spotify, it just so happens. I was kind of grandfathered into the whole Apple idea from, I guess, the iTunes platform. So I was kind of like used to the idea of Apple. But I've recently been really getting into King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard.
Give me that back.
Yeah.
That new. Are you talking about the?
The newest stuff is actually straight up like metal, thrash.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that isn't the thing that led me in. The name, I heard the name 4 or 5 years ago at first, and I thought, I don't care.
They seem very silly.
Immediately I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to care. I won't care is what I thought based on the name. Just so foolish to be so close-minded, And then I saw a picture of them, and there's a whole bunch of them, and I'm just like, what is the deal?
They have 2 drummers.
They have 2 drummers, and then I gave it a taste. I'd say sometime maybe 2 or 3 about 2016.
That was when they put out the Nonagon Infinity record.
And I think they put out a handful of records that year.
They put out
maybe?
it was either 2016 or 2017. They put out like 5 records
in
1 year.
I came into the party when they were like at this huge prolific time, and the first song I listened to got me.
Yeah.
So I've been like in sampling here and there, although I haven't been like endorsing them highly to
a little bit goes a long way. Because
truly.
they're very much that kind of band that's like basically doing the same thing, but they change how they're doing it.
They grab a pattern and they really rock it, and they get funky with it.
It's very groovy math rock kind of deal.
Yeah, I was listening to a song called Rattlesnake from Flying Microtonal Banana.
That's a very interesting record too, where they're only using microtonal instruments.
Yeah, and it's just like I'm reading more, and on every one of the albums I listen to, and I'm just like, what are these guys doing? And then the new album that's coming out in August is a thrash album.
It's a really thrashy album, but it's very similar to their other records. But they just turn everything up.
It's them doing that. It's not, So I mean, I listened to that specifically this morning. And then also Mark Lanigan Band I've been listening to a lot.
That's
and
a standby.
I love that.
The King Gizzard, they sell out every tour.
They're playing fucking Central Park Summer Stage.
They sell out every show. Every show worldwide.
I walked into their whole deal a year or 2 ago, just basically picking a small piece of fruit, taking a taste. I turn around, I look at them, they're fucking huge. I had no idea. So
they're
I
a
don't
worldwide
feel
band, yeah.
I don't feel revelatory at all in saying like, oh, I listened to that this morning. It's like I almost want to tell on myself, like I've been experimenting with this King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard stuff. I've been sampling it.
Did you see their videos for this new record too?
I did see the videos.
Those are pretty out of hand as well.
They're pretty wacko. But that was
silly.
after listening to Cinema first.
Yes.
Then it was let me clarify.
To clear the palate. Threw in some.
Yeah. But King Gizzard was what
and then Paul, what do you start your day with? Because it's not like you guys don't like live in bunk beds or anything.
No,
in the same. Yeah.
Not for a while.
You're your own man, that's for sure.
It's weird. I've been listening to in the morning the Highwaymen, which is the
supergroup,
the
right?
supergroup of Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Chris Christopherson. For some reason, I didn't know. I really never listened to his solo stuff.
He knew all those guys,
and of course Johnny Cash, and just something about it is just a nice way to just kind of like, I'm on the train and it's just like doom, doom, doom. It's like a Western.
It's classic. And how do you listen to it? You listen to Spotify? Do you have it on your iTunes?
I have it on Spotify.
Okay,
I do
okay.
the Spotify, unfortunately.
I'm not going to
Sorry.
dog you too much.
Sorry.
I won't dog
just,
you.
My subscription came free
There you
with
go.
my Sprint account for
Right.
my phone. So
Right. Why
just
wouldn't
let
you
know.
do it? I
So
understand. Yeah.
It wasn't even by
Pandora
choice.
was a way that I've discovered music in the past.
I haven't done
I
Pandora
tried
in a long time.
Spotify out. It was difficult for me, but we won't go into that.
It
Because
has
this is-
there's some nice things
yes.
about it, but I won't get
This
into
is a
it.
show about how people interact with music and how it's changed, and everybody does something different, which is always very interesting to
I mean,
me.
if I had my choice, I would listen to like vinyl records on the train. If
Wouldn't
I could.
that, well, yeah, then you'd be
That's
one
what-
of those guys.
That's what I would do. Like if that was an option.
Right.
But can't do that. But I had never listened to any of the Highwaymen, and my 18-year-old cousin a couple weeks ago at a 4th of July party,
Yeah.
he is really into Willie Nelson.
Willie is so I grew up in Missouri and around in Arkansas, so like country music, and Willie is a very distinctive voice
Yeah.
in American music, and it's like a salve
Yeah.
on my, and you know what, that's where we'll go next. So so tell me about your cousin real quick. So
He's just a young guy who just like he's been talking about loving Willie for years. And he likes to cook. So we do like a Secret Santa for Christmas with all my cousins. And last year I got him a custom made Willie Nelson apron.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. He was all about it. He was cooking burgers for us wearing it that day.
Well,
so.
Willie wrote his big 3 hits, like all on one car trip back in like the 60s, maybe the late 50s.
Wow.
And he wrote them all and he sold them for like $150. But he was, but growing up that was always, so my dad was a cattleman and it was always on the radio. Willie Nelson was always, because that's how you listen to music in the 80s.
Dad was a cattleman?
Yes, yeah, a cattle farmer in Arkansas. So I'd go down on the summers to visit him because my parents weren't married. So like I would go visit him in the summers and do bale hay and all that shit.
Holy crap.
And Randy Travis was another voice that I'm unabashedly, I used to be ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of it anymore. Yeah. But Willie Nelson, if you ever listen to him and Johnny Cash did that Unplugged thing for MTV or whatever.
Oh my God, they did?
Yes, and they did VH1 Storytellers.
Okay.
And there's and Willie Nelson does a version of Always on My Mind.
Yeah.
That is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And at the end, you hear Johnny Cash just at the end. He goes, "Yeah."
That's so good.
So Willie Nelson is kind of like that bypass in my brain, unashamed of that. So what's that for you? What's a track? And we'll start with Paul and go to Ev again. What's a track for you? Because you guys, let me describe your music real quick for maybe the uninitiated. I almost call you're like borderline a noise band to me. Very improvisational, but heavy. And there's definitely like patterns and structures that you guys kind of build. There's like a drone edge to it as well. And very experimental. I'll put it that way. So Ev's nodding, so I'm doing all right. So,
right on.
Thumbs up.
and I consider myself a rocker, but I love all kinds of things, and I imagine the same's with you. So Paul, start out. Let me know what's a track that one song, not even an album, but what's that one song that like as a young man really like drove you towards music, or kind of like still to this day you're like, no, I'll stand for that all day long.
Wow. As a young man.
Sure, or even something, yeah, we're all aging. So
I would have to say,
and don't be afraid to get a little closer to that.
I will get close. Hello. I'm trying to think, because like something that really drove me to music.
Sure, or just something that just presses the good buttons in your head.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like too meaningful, just for you.
It's pretty much anything off of Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen.
All right.
Just because that was always on in the car when I was a kid, this is before I even picked up drumsticks.
Yeah.
And just the driving beat of Max Weinberg always stuck in my head, and it was kind of like, simplistic kind of beats.
Sure.
So like kind of like,
yeah, they're not a prog band by any means.
Right.
Yeah.
So like I just remember being like able to, like, when I was first getting really like the itch to play drums, I first kind of wanted to play guitar, but I was like 8.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't making sense. And then by the time I was 9, I got my first drum set. So like my dad was a big Bruce Springsteen fan, so he always had it on. So
it's a condition in this area.
Yeah. And just something about, I mean, like Jungle Land. Like I remember just hearing
Yeah.
that as a young kid and just being like, wow, like that was like the first epic song that was like, wow, this is like 7 minutes long.
And how were you hearing that? Was that like parents' record collection in the car?
I was
like,
in the car in the PT Cruiser. We
oh,
had a PT
nice,
Cruiser.
nice. Those are classic. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
my dad liked it because it looked like a hearse, I think.
That's the most '90s car I think that you could describe.
Yeah,
like
it was-
name a car from the '90s. PT Cruiser.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thankfully they don't make those anymore. They were not. They were basically like a death trap. I mean,
Sure.
In the 90s.
Yeah.
Yes,
They
yeah.
were not safe.
Yeah.
They didn't have good. They didn't even get good gas mileage.
Right,
I mean,
right,
I
right.
knew that even at an 8-year-old. I'm like, Dad, we're getting too much gas. We're pulling over way too much.
now, Ev, what was the song that's like still again because we're about the same age.
Yeah.
So like that still to this day takes you back to like that 8-year-old, that like 10-year-old or 15-year-old, whatever those pivotal moments. Like, what's the thing that gives you the warm feeling?
Yeah.
Task on this because I know deep.
Oh, the deep cuts.
Yeah, no.
And I should point out for the uninitiated again, these you guys are cousins.
Yes,
but
we are
with
cousins.
like a decade between you, give or take.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
is closed in the decade that we've been playing.
Sure.
It is definitely closed very quickly for all the time that we
So
spent
yeah,
together.
definitely a
Decade.
family affair over here with cinema.
Wow, I mean, it's like I think of two specific songs, but you were asking for one, So
Well, I mean,
don't
if
wanna
there's
hog it
two
up.
and they're always go ahead.
Well,
yeah.
there's two that really are like I'd say I hear them as soon as I hear them, and it's like this meaningful, magical thing that brings me to this place.
Sure.
There's a Bob Dylan song called "Like a Rolling Stone."
Of course.
And that first snare hit, pop,
Yeah.
dun, like in the organ, everything is in.
Yes.
When I was first learning how to play guitar, 1992, I was about 14 years old. That was maybe the second or third song I learned how to play. And I remember listening to it from my parents' record collection and sitting down with a piece of paper and pen and writing down every lyric.
Yeah.
So because it's essentially 3 or 4 chords shifted around.
Which record is that off of? I can never remember.
My mother had a Bob Dylan's Greatest Hits record.
Okay, yeah. The one with his
so-
face on the side.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have that same one. Yeah.
That's where I pulled it from. It might have been track 1 on that.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting there and writing every lyric down so I'd have the lyrics written so I could try to play the song on guitar and sing it. And being just like blown away at the lyrics, the imagery, the usage, how many lyrics there were, how it just
a long
it's
song.
7 verses long.
Yeah.
I think and I'm not going to start to paraphrase the lyrics. I'm not going to do it any justice. A lot of stuff spoke to me. A lot of stuff like, oh, I was getting this or that at such a young age. Like it felt like things were connecting in my head, and the power and the weight of the words in music, I think, kind of affected me.
He was a very young man when he wrote it too.
Yeah.
Like he made his start at 19, and that couldn't have been past the 3rd album.
Yeah, that's
So he
very
must have been
early.
21. Like so for a 14-year-old to connect to that makes sense.
And by no means do I claim by any way to be a huge Dylan guy, but
Sure.
that song resonates in a very big way.
What's the other one?
The other one, "Alive" by Pearl Jam.
That was one for me too.
Really?
10, right? That's the one. Yes,
That's 10, yeah.
Oh, and so it was Alive. You said
"Alive," yeah.
Oh my God.
Song
yes.
3 from 10. Yeah, it was for me. I had just gotten a new Walkman for Christmas. It was
Yep.
It was Christmas of 1991. I had just seen Guns N' Roses played Madison Square Garden that month, and I saw them. I was very lucky to have gone to the show.
Yeah.
And Soundgarden opened. So the initial.
Oh my God! In
Yeah,
'91.
In 91, and
That's
I was a little kid.
amazing.
I was like 12.
That's
Yeah, I was
amazing.
12. So I had asked for I either asked for Christmas or for Hanukkah, or I remember acquiring the Soundgarden CD, Bad Motorfinger, previous to that show, because already like some of my habits that I still have to this day, like if I'm going to see a band, I wind up kind of like listening to that band a bunch around then.
It enhances
Like,
your experience.
Yeah, like a couple of bands I've seen this year, I wound up like listening to their records over and over around that time, but not to Sidebar. We could talk about that later on, etc. Because it's like Paul's the vinyl guy. Like I'm a compact disc guy, so that's worth even mentioning too, because that's also a generational thing.
Well, and they weren't. You didn't buy as many in the early '90s.
Yeah.
It was still kind of cassettes that you got, and then like around '95, you'd be like, "Oh, I think I can get the CD."
Yeah.
That's when they started putting everything out on
It
CD.
started for me. I had a Discman, so
Yeah.
I'd buy the cassettes, and then the ones I
Yep.
really liked, I'd collect for my Discman. But to get back around to it,
Yes.
I had just gotten a fresh new Walkman
Oh,
in
yeah.
December of '91, and I just loaded it with batteries and was walking around my house with the Walkman on and like just exploring the radio, not even listening to tapes, like trying to hear like new music.
That's right. Yeah, because you could get the AM FM band on those too. Yeah.
And although it wasn't, there was a rock station at the time called 1480 Z Rock, AM 1480 Z Rock.
Yep.
Yeah, they used to play a top 50 like metal and hard rock songs on every Sunday night AM.
Oh yeah, the
1480.
Sunday night shows on the rock stations were the
Oh, my
jam
God.
in the
Oh, my God.
90s. Where Clear
So-
Channel bought everything up.
Yeah. So I'm perusing that, trying to find this, that, and the other, and they're like, "This is something brand new, Pearl Jam Alive," and it starts off, and I'm like, okay, and the vocals come in, and it's more of a baritone leading vocal at the time.
Yeah.
A lot of the vocalists a little bit more, like higher dudes. So like,
Well,
I'm like,
especially
okay, I'm like,
Soundgarden, they were going for that Deep Purple kind of vibe.
Totally. So like
Iron
here
Maiden
we
and
are.
whatnot,
It's
yeah.
kind of fallen a little differently on my ears, and I'm liking it. And the thing that body slammed me that first time listening to it is it's like a minute and a half outro guitar solo.
Yeah.
Like the song is great. It's got a bridge. It's got a change. It's got a chorus with a slogan like "I'm still alive," all of that, and then they kick it over into this amazing like blues jam thing.
And it was
that's-
very like kind of almost like a change of key, almost like a much
It's-
brighter, much happier near the end. Yeah.
it's not quite a Layla ending, but it's like
Right.
there's a shift there that happens at the end of Alive. For me,
Yes.
at least, as a little 12-year-old, there was
course.
a goddamn shift that fucking happened.
Well, and with 10, it's that whole album. It's very spacious in its engineering.
Oh,
So
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a lot of room to move around inside of that, and it was before the digital age. So like the compression was still the tape and all that kind of stuff. It was amazing.
Yeah, so that definitely, like to this day, when I hear the first chord kick of Alive or when I hear the guitar solo at the end, I am air guitaring, whether I'm 40
Right.
or I'm 30 or I'm 18 or I'm at someone's birthday party or I'm at someone's wedding or something. Like it gets me going. It makes me kind of remember. It does that magical thing that music does. It's a time machine, sense memory.
Yeah, it
Boom.
takes you straight back, and you're there.
I'm right there where I
Right.
just described where I was with the Walkman
And
on
it's
at
tactile
12.
too. You can feel it. Now, let me ask you. So we kind of nailed down the dates. You guys are 10 years apart, so you kind of have almost like a very similar family experience, I'm sure, but almost a different New York experience.
Sure.
Because when you're coming of age, based on what you're telling me, New York was a very different place than it was when you were the same age.
I would definitely
Yeah.
say so. I'm born 78. He's born 88.
Okay, I
To
was
give-
81, so I'm kind of like right after you.
Yeah.
So tell me, like, what was it like? So where did you grow up? Tell me exactly where you guys grew up. 'Cause-
I'll start off.
Yeah.
I'm the older one.
Makes sense.
I'm holding the mic already.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I will yield. I will
Okay,
yield.
all right.
I will yield.
I'll try to keep it on the rails. Yeah.
Okay, please keep me on the rails.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, by the time that music really took me over and infected me, and I knew I had to play music, I knew I had to be in a band. I was about 14. I learned how to play guitar. I started to try to find people to play with. By 1994, when I was 15, turning 16, I found my first band.
Now, where is this? Like, where are
This
you?
is I'm living in an area in a neighborhood called Bergen Beach. Bergen Beach is kind of close to Kings Plaza Shopping Mall.
Okay.
It's South Brooklyn. It's just a neighborhood over from Garrettson Beach where Paul is living at the time, although he's very young.
Very
at this
young.
time.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of neighborhood that if you're not an actual Brooklynite or you haven't been from here, like we've traveled around a lot.
Yeah.
People never when they ask where we're from in Brooklyn, if we say Bergen Beach or Garrettson Beach, people.
It's deep.
Generally,
it's deep Brooklyn.
Yeah, if you're not from here, you wouldn't know of it.
Right.
Sometimes we have to generalize it and say we're from Coney Island or we're from South Brooklyn.
What was it like at the time? Like in the early 90s? Like, was it, because like right now you go down to that area and it's primarily like Eastern European, a lot of Eastern Europeans, a lot of Italians, Irish Italians, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, the Bergen Beach area that I grew up in was definitely like a very Italian neighborhood, I would say.
Okay.
I mostly Italian, and it was very nice, very quiet, very suburban, very tucked away.
Sure.
Like it wasn't the urbana soaked experience that you would kind of take away or assume from Brooklyn. I mean, the high school I went to in Canarsie was a little rough, South Shore High School, but the neighborhood I grew up in and where I was when I started my first band, it was nice. Bergen Beach area. The guys I met were all from the Bergen Beach Mill Basin area. We started our first band, and at the time, the club to play in Brooklyn was a club called Lemoore. Lemoore was like the St. Vitus of the time, like all the...
And where was that?
Lemoore was in Bensonhurst on 62nd Street between 15th and 16th Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah, Lemoore...
Like straight south of here, basically.
Yeah, it was in an area that now you could, if you drove past it now, you would never assume that anything happened there. But that's what Brooklyn was like then.
Sure.
There wasn't this like Williamsburg scene or Bushwick cool vibe or Bed-Stuy. There was none of those things started to really develop until the aughts. I mean, the whole Bushwick, explosion was probably '08, but I mean,
Right.
Williamsburg was probably '01, but now I'm talking like '94.
It seems like a lot of the rock scene at the time, because like now when people hear about a rock scene, especially if you're local, you hear about it. It's like Brooklyn. But like back then, it was like Manhattan.
Yeah, Brooklyn.
Manhattan.
That's what I was kind of starting to
Yeah.
claw at. As I'm trying to not go too far around and meander, but really there wasn't a specific Brooklyn scene. What Brooklyn was when I was growing up, the scene was Biohazard, Typo Negative, and Life of Agony.
That sounds pretty fun. Yeah,
those were the three bands that had gotten to a point where they had gotten known. Maybe one of them was on Roadrunner Records at the time. Roadrunner wasn't a huge major; it was like a legit heavy weight metal indie.
Sure.
But those are the three bands that were from the area that I came from. Metal was what was associated with Brooklyn. There wasn't a coolness. There wasn't any kind of a style or any stylistic, like...
it's kind of typical of a lot of cities too, especially like all the major cities I've lived in. There's always like a vibrant, I will not say vibrant, but there's an active metal and punk scene always.
Yeah.
But anything higher tier than that, it's like people just didn't tend to graduate any higher than like the local metal. Like there was never like a standout. Right.
Yeah, everyone wants to rebel. Everybody rebels together, but no one kind of rises up.
Yeah, but
I
everybody's
would
still got to
say.
borrow mom's car or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, at least to encapsulate it, the Brooklyn that I was growing up in, there wasn't the scene that there is now. There wasn't like 100 different places to play. There was a club called Lemoore in the middle of Bensonhurst that if you didn't know it was there, you would walk right past it.
And what was the vibe at those shows? Was it like very like...
No, Lemoore itself, because the first year of playing in a band, 1994, the band I was in, this band called Rise with my really good friends, we played that club Lemoore, I'd say 6 times that year, like once every other month. And it was like, I'd say, like it was the St. Vitus of the time. It was like a 350, 400 cap. I mean, we were young. I mean, at the time, underage drinking was like totally chill, at least the nights that we played there.
That's what I've heard about New York in the 90s.
Had a lot of
as well, yeah.
crazy fun. The shows were really, you get all your friends to come. It was a lot. It was a lot of fun. By the second year of playing, we moved into playing in Manhattan. And that's when we got into playing CBGBs, got into playing a place called The Spiral, which isn't there any longer, which was
most
right
of
across
them
the street
aren't,
from
yeah.
Mercury Lounge. We also got into place the Pyramid Club, which is still there. Very funky, very crazy, very wacko outside club that's been there for a long time. They've done rock shows over the years. We played there, etc. So then we moved into playing in the city, and then the next few years of playing in bands through the 90s was mostly playing in the city. You didn't really seek out gigs in Brooklyn, or at least the band that I was in, playing kind of metal-ish kind of music.
Sure.
And pre-internet, really realizing how you can even go about getting traction on being in a band.
Right,
Like,
you just kind of went through it and you did
just
the flyers.
kind of thinking some dude is going to walk past your practice space and discover you or
Now,
something.
what were
like,
that's something I have a question about too. What were the crowds like? So, like when you're talking about Lemoore, right? You said. So, what was the crowd like at Lemoore's versus like the crowd up in Lower East Side?
The crowd at Lemoore was way more like I don't want to use such a
Was
stupid
Lemoore
term
all?
like
Was it
hair
all
metal.
ages?
Lemoore had all ages nights.
Yeah, okay.
But it definitely Lemoore was like 18 to enter, and then they'll stamp you to drink.
Right.
Like they wanted to keep those doors open, but Lemoore, by the time we got there in '94, Lemoore was definitely a lot more in the hair metal world.
Okay.
Like people who were dressing more in that style. Or people,
Yeah.
the whole part of going out as a fan, being on display, like as much as the band, like that kind of style. That wasn't really so much the grunge or punk thing that maybe I adopted. The working man's kind of like show up. And,
Right.
and
Well, the
kick ass.
popular thing at the time, like grunge hit really hard, but glam metal had been like the thing for a while.
What existed basically in Brooklyn at that time was like different strands of metal and like the metal that was at the forefront of Lemoore's. I mean, those
You still see a lot of that out on Long Island too. Like you'll see those like they don't dress like they don't dress in the hair metal style as much. It's more toned down, but the hair is still teased up.
Yeah. So the vibe at Lemoore was just party. When we got into Manhattan, the vibe was more serious. Like if you're any good, I guess we'll sit through you. If you suck, like no one really cares. That
Right.
was the vibe as soon as we got to Manhattan.
Okay, so like
Lemoore
they'd
was
stay in. Lemoore was just like everybody's drunk having a
Lemoore
good time.
is like all your friends could come. They could all get in. It's right in the middle of Brooklyn. We don't even know why or how. And it turns into kind of a party. Whereas Manhattan was. you're playing with grown-ups, because I was 16 at the time. Like, more of the bands are grown-ups. Like, either, you catch someone's ear or you don't, but it was just a little bit more of a real or a realistic take.
You'd have
on
a tougher
things.
crowd in Manhattan.
Definitely,
for sure. Okay.
definitely in those years. So I think I probably exhausted the question. I don't know. I'll
No, that's
pass
all
it-
right. I want to
yeah.
pass it over to Paul and
pass
just
it to
kind of
Paul.
get the idea, because Paul, you're like I said, about 10 years later. So you're like 16 in what, 94? You said. So you're 16 in like '04. Is
Yep.
that about right?
Pretty much, yeah.
And by that point, I know rock had kind of like come through again in a more diverse way. Because like yeahs and like those kind of bands came through around 2001, 2002.
Yeah.
So-
So in 2001, I was in 7th grade. So
Fair enough.
So
yeah.
I wasn't. I don't know what I was listening to. Was on like MTV at that time.
Sure. Yeah, back when MTV
Right.
mattered. Yeah, and
it was like the Total Request Live and all that stuff. Like,
Right.
That's how I got my music. There was still no internet. There was like I was just the only magazines I was really reading was like drum magazines. So I got into
Sure.
some weird metal stuff because a lot of metal drummers were on the covers of those magazines.
like
at that
Tool's
time.
drummer and like Danny Carey and all
like
those
Morgan
guys were
Rose,
really
the guy
big.
from
Yeah.
Seven Dust or some
Yes.
shit like that.
Yeah.
Like that. So I started peeking into that, or like John Dolmayan from System of a Down, like that. Led me
Yes.
to listen to System of
There
a
was
Down.
a lot of really fantastic drummers during that like new metal,
Right.
strange punk
See,
days.
that was on MTV too.
Yes.
Which I didn't have. I didn't have that.
Yeah,
I didn't have that.
MTV2 was
I didn't have that
a
until
slap in the face. Like,
But then they also had weird bands like Cold or like shit like that. I mean, remember Cold? Like,
yeah.
or
Well, I remember in
like,
2002, 2001 when the big System of a Down record came out.
Yeah.
And me and my buddies after band practice would turn on MTV to try to catch the Chop Suey video.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember
Right.
that? Like trying to like catch the video that.
Yeah, and if you didn't catch it,
and
we were like always really thrilled, like when we caught the video, whatever it happened to be,
Yeah.
But that was when MTV only played music like later. in
Right,
the
right.
day.
Well, they did have that 1 hour a week, like after school, which
Yeah.
was Total Request Live. Which
Yeah.
I remember the day, and I'm not ashamed to say this. Like one of my first real obsession bands was Blink-182.
Sure.
And that was 2001 was their second really big album after
Yeah.
the Enema of the State album.
Yes, yeah, and they
Now
were
they're-
all over the place.
Right, and then that was the one when they were running around naked in the streets,
Right.
for their music video. And then the album right after that, their second like real big major label was Take Off Your Pants and Jacket.
Yes, yeah.
That was that one, and that was all over MTV at the time.
It was everywhere,
2001.
along with what Aaliyah was gone already, but like there was that, there was.
But there was a nice melange
Yeah.
of like
Well, this is
Eminem,
some-
Britney
some
Spears,
41. You remember
some 41. But it was like a mix of like, and so it was always a competition of like, is like some 41 gonna beat Britney Spears this week? Or
Right,
whatever.
and there's
Like,
always a crowd of people in
Right,
Times
and
Square or whatever screaming their heads
I
off.
don't
yeah.
exactly know what was the criteria to get upvoted or whatever. Like, did you have to call in? It was
Nobody knew.
Yeah, it was.
It was a
probably
different
some
time.
Payola, probably.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
some
yeah.
shit like that. But
So that's you coming up and like you're getting
That's-
interested in drums and that
Yep.
kind of stuff, and then you're growing up not too far from where Ev is.
Yep.
Does your older cousin like
Yep.
take you to shows and stuff, or
not at that point in
All right,
time.
all right.
We really didn't get closer until like maybe I was like 15 or 16. 'cause
Okay.
I had lived in California for a couple of years, so he was
oh,
kind of
okay.
away. But
now, how did you start getting into like going to shows in town?
see, there really was. So where I grew up was kind of similar to where Ev grew up, but a different part. Like I lived in Garrison Beach.
Okay.
Just to interrupt, this is Ev. Very isolated.
If you couldn't tell.
Yeah, it's with Garrettson Beach and Bergen Beach, the areas that we both grew up in. You'd have
Very
to
similar, but different.
Very similar, but the main similarity, you'd have to catch a bus if you're young and wanted to get somewhere.
Yeah.
You catch a bus and be on the bus for a good 25 minutes before you get to the subway.
Oh, okay.
35 to 40 minutes
At
to
least.
a different neighborhood to get to Manhattan. So it was an isolated type of scenario. Like
Sure.
I had to really like seek kids out in my neighborhood, basically based on the fact of who had a mullet at the time or who wore a
Right.
Metallica shirt.
Now, were
because
there-
there was no internet or Facebook, so like I couldn't kind of relate with where he's getting like. It was a little bit claustrophobic almost when you wanted to be in a band and lived where we did, and the pre-internet, pre-simple to hook up with other people who wanted to do what you wanted to do age. So that's why I just wanted to pipe in for a second. So like I didn't really mention like Bergen Beach, Garrettson Beach. It's like this isolated area where there isn't a venue. There's barely like a record store. you
Well, I
know,
grew up in a
like-
rural area that was very similar.
Yeah,
Like when you
so-
drive across the Midwest and you see those places where like you're on the highway and you see a small town with like a McDonald's, like right by the highway. That's the town I grew up in. right? And it was the same kind of deal. Now the way we got around is we'd have house shows. And they weren't too common because it was very difficult to find the parent that was cool with that. Is that something that happened where you guys were?
We didn't get exposed to house shows until we started playing New Jersey house shows when we got involved with a bunch of college kids who liked the band maybe in 2012. I was just going to hand back over to Paul, but Paul's scenarios, Paul joins this band with me, forms what we do together when he's just 19. So the first year and a half of doing the band, because I was 29 and he was 19 when we started. So the first year and a half of doing the band, we would have to, for the most part, sneak him in, walk him in at load in and leave him inside because he's too young.
Right.
Or we have to say, hey man, X his hand immediately, he's underage. So his show going like age, he was running around with me going and playing them kind of just based around like there weren't too many shows in our area.
So that's like, also kind of isolated too.
Yeah,
Maybe you can speak to that, Paul. Like, no, it's all right.
No, I mean,
I thought that would be a helpful.
No, thank you.
Taking the microphone back. I love to hold the microphone.
He knows my history better than I do.
That's fair. That's fair. It's a family affair.
But I hate to tell you this, but I did have band experiences before I was in this band with Ev. Because I did
that's like telling my kids I was married before.
I did like music and do musical things before I was in this
sure.
band. Nothing crazy.
I seem to remember you telling me a couple years ago that like jazz was kind of like your bag too, as a drummer.
Yeah, that was like when I was in high school, I was in the jazz band in high school, and that like got me exposed to a lot of different music. Got me to go to Japan with the school. Like somehow one of the alumni of my high school, Severian High School in Bay Ridge or Diker, I guess, became a mayor of a city in Japan, and he came back and wanted to have our just to have like a cultural like kind of like exchange.
Sure,
thing.
yeah.
He organized us to go. I was on a 10-day tour of Japan.
That's fantastic.
When I was 15,
That's fantastic.
Like, yeah, it was crazy. So like, I mean, not to. I mean, obviously, all my amazing musical experience and my real like growth experiences happened from the time I joined the band with this guy.
Sure.
But
well, and there's always that kind of feeling, and you can probably attest to this when you're first doing shows. But there's that feeling where like you're really young. And you're kind of not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Like, did you find that was kind of like that?
Our first shows there was no alternative entrance. It was just get there super early and hope that no one notices that I don't have pubes yet, or something.
that I only ordered a Coke.
Yeah, basically. But honestly, I wanted to kind of come full circle on this. Like my first gig also, when I was like 13, was also at L'Amour's.
Okay.
And I got to...
It really was the spot then.
It really was. So that was it was this very similar experience even then. But by the time I was playing there a decade later, it was already... It was like... Wasn't it like a dance club? It was like Panache. It became like also on like certain nights.
Yeah. It closed in late... like 97, 96, or I might be wrong with the timestamp.
Like switched owner,
Then reopened as L'Amour's, but with also like a nightclub attached, I believe.
I understand. Okay.
So that was like my first band, which I don't count as a band.
Yeah,
it was just basically we did like the punk rock pop covers of the time.
Sure.
But that was my first. So we had to we got print out of our tickets and we had to cut them out ourselves.
Yes, I remember that. Yes.
Tickets.
Oh, that sucked.
Yeah.
Early aughts, like late 90s, that was they made you like sell a certain amount.
You had to we had to at least bring 25 people to even and like that was just, they didn't care if the people actually showed up. We just had to at least pay for those amount of people.
Right, exactly.
Give them the money over before we could actually walk
They
in the
wanted
door
their
and play.
guarantee ahead of time. Yeah.
So that was...
Now, I have a question for you guys, because that brings to mind a practice that I've heard about that wasn't happening when I was younger. I'm like, you guys are telling me your experiences. I'm like right between the two of them. But now they say they take a share of the merch. Has that ever happened to you guys? Is that something?
You might remember better than me, but I think that did happen to us a couple of times.
On the a handful of years ago, we did a tour with Black Flag opening for them.
Yes,
we've talked to you about
that was the
it.
U.S. tour or the European tour?
The U.S.
Okay, yeah.
And so obviously on that tour, we were playing venues that were over our heads, that we wouldn't have been rolling into town playing House of Blues Anaheim unless we were opening for Black Flag.
Sure.
So at those venues, at a handful of the larger venues, thousands, 3,000 seat, 2,000 seat. One of the rules that was put in place, the management will come over and say, okay, here's they give you basically a clipboard, and they'd want you to basically keeping it. We kept it fuzzy because we didn't really like. I wanted to put it at the bottom of my memory too, but I remember it very clearly. They would come over and give you a clipboard, and this wasn't every one of them, but the big enough venues that they would come over, give you a clipboard, and say, "Please keep an inventory, and we take a percentage of the merch at the end of the night."
Oh, that is such bullshit.
And I remember at the time,
What percentage should they take?
I mean, I think based on like the fact that we were the opening band, it might have been a smaller percentage than Black Flag. I mean, I don't want to throw the number out there because I don't remember what it was, but it was something that was substantial enough that we were concerned.
Was there a time too that like we didn't sell enough and they were like, "This is it," or something? They were like kind of pissed off that we occupied that real estate. And didn't
they were like, one of the nights they were questioning our inventory, because like we were showing that we showed, sold 4 shirts and like, how could, when you got, 1,000 people, when you got 1,000 people that had, you only sell 4 shirts. It's like, we're not Black Flag.
Yeah, exactly. They're not here to see us.
You should have saw us last night. They bought all the shirts last night, miss. But it's just like,
they didn't take a cut of it either.
Yeah, and they didn't take a cut, but some of the bigger places definitely were doing that. And that was a handful. That was 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm sure that's become way more commonplace.
Well, you see it on Twitter. You see people talk about it, and they're just like, "What? Why? How are people supposed?" That's like the one way, as my understanding over the years has been. That's like the one way for a band to actually make a little money.
Only way. I can tell you now, for that tour we just talked about, we both quit our jobs because that was a 4-month tour.
Right.
So we had to quit our jobs to do it because you go and do that tour, period.
Then
you
to survive day to
later
day,
on. Yeah,
period.
The way we got through on that tour was selling all the merch that we did.
Right.
Like that was what put us into the survival area. So that is
most tours to this day. I mean, whenever we go to Europe, or I mean, whenever we do anything, it's always we're assuming or hoping that we're going to get a little chunk of change in our pockets.
A certain amount to get through to the next. You're really living like
never,
hand to mouth. Yeah.
The guarantee is never guaranteed.
Yeah.
It really is true. So like relying on the merch for a band, especially a band on the road, when you're like basically on a ship in the middle of the ocean, hoping that you don't take on too much water to go under. The merch is the goddamn oar.
Right.
I mean, so it's really a shame. I think and especially because there is no infrastructure built in to make any sort of money anyway.
No, you're always dealing with whoever's right in front of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you, New York today, right? Clearly very different. We're living in Giuliani and Bloomberg's New York, as the older folks in this neighborhood call it. So like, how is it different today than it was when you guys got started, right? Because you've been going about, 10 years now?
11 and a half.
Yeah, so you've been going a while. Like, that's longer than most bands go in the city, as far as I can tell. So what's different now than back in the day when you got started? And is it, what's better, what's worse?
Can I just say one thing?
And I'm just going to hand both mics to you guys.
Okay, sure. Yeah, the place where I grew up in Garrison Beach is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. It's just an Irish shanty town where, I mean, I don't want to say like too much negativity about it, but it's I go down there and it's just like, it's exactly the same. Nothing has changed. There's still no like real activity as far as like music or anything like that. I mean, there's like cover bands and I mean, even the place where I live today, I live in Bay Ridge. I mean, there's really not any music scene. So like, as far as Brooklyn is concerned, it's just been deduced down to like Bushwick and Williamsburg. And that we have seen change over the last over a decade immensely, from playing like bombed out like pickle factories, that now we go there and it's just like it's an actual venue or something, like, what I mean? But so like I think we speak more to like, I mean, I personally feel like I could speak more to those parts of Brooklyn rather than like the actual like Manhattan, because also Manhattan is kind of the same too in a lot of ways. I mean, like the types of music are different, but we've found over the years that there's really no reason for a band like us to even like venture into Manhattan to even really play unless the bill is like perfect or the timing is right or whatever, So it's.
Why do you think that is?
That really has happened. I mean, because the venues in Manhattan that were there, I guess, folded in the face of the explosion of Brooklyn. There hasn't been really, over the last few years, there isn't really a venue kind of left over there. At one point, like that Ludlow Street, etc., where Pianos and Cake Shop and Arlene's Grocery, which somehow is still there, and like Fat Baby, and there used to be there was a whole strip, a bunch of places to play over there, etc. And then it kind of like slowly those all went away, those all folded, and then it's hard to really explain, but I'd say for the last 2 or 3 years, for us to go play a gig in Manhattan, it's fairly rare. There isn't really much of a reason. There isn't really much of a
Like, what's the place you would go to Manhattan
to play a gig or to see a show.
If someone like offered us a gig, which one would be the place you'd be like, okay, yeah, well, we should do that? Like, there's so many. I feel like there's times where we get offered a gig in Manhattan, and it's just like, no, like we're not gonna.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's such the feeling that like there isn't really much of a want in Manhattan any longer.
Like it used to be like maybe like Pianos or something. We would be like, oh yeah, we do a gig at Pianos, but like,
yeah, I mean, it's
even there now. It's like
it's hard. Yeah, we've been doing it for 11 and a half years. Yes, in 11 and a half years' time, there's been 11,000 bands that we've seen come and go. I mean, we love to do it. We found the reason why we do it, which is why we're still doing it at 11 and a half years. It's because of the therapy and the love, so I mean, I guess some bands don't hang around long enough for the miracle, if you want to kind of put it that way. But the miracle takes a lot of backbreaking and a lot of questioning of everything for you to finally get the miracle of like, oh, I do this because I love it. That's the only reason, not for anyone else's opinion of it or where I've gone or what I'm doing with it. But anyway, over that time, the 11 and a half years that we've done it, Brooklyn has changed immensely. I mean, the whole Williamsburg was exploding when we started. I mean, it was, as you mentioned earlier, 02, 03, 04, TV on the radio, yes. Of course, Williamsburg is happening, real Williamsburg. Paul and I started in 08. Essentially, all the Brooklyn gigs are in Williamsburg, and they're starting to migrate into Bushwick. And we're like, Bushwick? We're scratching our head. Bushwick? Yeah, we're on Shoals Street in Bushwick, or whatever street that we're on in Bushwick, doing this show, doing that show. Then it's 2009, and now almost all the good shows are in these bombed out places in Bushwick, and we're like, and then it's 2010, and now some of those bombed out places in Bushwick are developing, but there's places to play in Bed-Stuy too, and we're like, oh, this is interesting. And
well, I've been noticing this pattern too. I've been here since 2010,
Gotcha.
and I've noticed that like when I got here, Williamsburg was it. Bushwick, you didn't go play in Bushwick.
Nope.
And now, and people may not realize this, like literally like over a year, like you'll see that you follow the same bands and they'll all play at these 2-3 places, and then it moves a little further east the next year.
Yeah,
and it's kind of an interesting phenomenon because that doesn't happen in other cities.
Yeah, it's been slowly kind of dribbling in a direction like that.
it's East Williamsburg now. That's like what they kind of call it, right? Like, now it's like on the map, East Williamsburg.
Yeah, which is essentially just like Ridgewood, which is just like Queens, which again, it's just dribbling further away from the Lower East Side. I guess. Yeah, like if like hardcore punk and all that stuff in New York in like 1980, like, and everything was based around 7A and where all those hardcore shows were, like, and then the Lower East Side was where a lot of stuff was all through into the 90s. Then by the beginning of the aughts, it jumped across the water to Williamsburg. Definitely by the 10s, Williamsburg was the spot, but it migrated and blew out into, like we said, Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, East Williamsburg. But it's just been this thing where it's like, as the venues closed, the neighborhoods broaden their shoulders in the other direction further. The neighborhoods get shinier, so the venues really wouldn't even have a place to begin with in that neighborhood. I worked at the Grand Victory for about maybe 2 years as a bouncer. Paul and I played the Grand Victory probably 25 times. We played a lot of great shows there. It was a fun place on Grand Street between Driggs and Roebling, I think. That was a really, important place for a lot of bands. A lot of cool stuff happened there. Now when I walk down that street, it's been closed for over 2 years. It hasn't reopened as anything new. The street doesn't even seem like it would house any kind of venue.
It hasn't opened as anything else?
No, let alone Trash Bar was across the street from Grand Victory. There used to be two kind of like, go-to punk venues on that street. You go through certain areas of Williamsburg now, and it doesn't seem in any way, shape, or form like the Williamsburg of 10 years ago, which was the place. I mean, I just was at Williamsburg last Friday at Union Pool seeing the Mesthetics, which is a band...
Shout out to Union Pool. I like that venue a lot.
The back room where the show happened was delightful. It was really great. As I was exiting Union Pool, not to sound like a, grandpa, old curmudgeonly, whatever, but it was the same vibe as I was exiting Union Pool as I had gotten the last times I was exiting venues in Manhattan. We played like pianos or like something like that, where as you leave the room where the band was playing, the other rooms have no idea there was any music happening, and now they are flooded.
That is 100% true.
Flooded.
That is 100%
And
true.
not to sound like I'm not Bridge and Tunnel, because I mean I'm from Brooklyn, so to get Manhattan, I'm Bridge and Tunnel. But it's flooded with every Bridge and Tunnel person from every suburb, everywhere that's in Manhattan,
Yeah.
just to be at a cool bar. So like, what I saw as I was leaving the Mesthetic show on Friday night was this really cool space that I walked into like 2 hours earlier become like a beehive of young nightlife,
Yeah,
which is
different.
fine.
It's like a different experience.
Yeah, it's just
though.
not
Yeah.
really what I was interested in. I was running. I got there and I'm like, this is amazing. I was
And
running.
Union
out of
Pool,
there
it
at the
really
end
is
of the night.
right in the middle of it. Like it really is. That location is
Yeah,
It's because it's right by the big diner off of Metropolitan.
And it's held on to that locality. It's held on to for years and years. That's one of the few venues over all the years I don't think that Paul and I have ever played. I think the other night was the first time I've seen a band there.
They've
I've
got
only
a
been there
different
once.
vibe too. Like it's definitely a different vibe.
Yeah.
Like Giraffes are playing there in August. They're doing their EP release, and I was like, really? That's be a weird place to see them.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem big enough for them.
Yeah. I was surprised at how small it was when I was seeing the Mesthetics there. The Mesthetics are the rhythm section from Fugazi, Brendan Canty and Joe Lally, and
Right.
then this amazing guitar player. They're a trio. So it was sold out, but it's like the room holds 100 people. So like you
Yeah.
can't really be in a bad spot.
Every
But,
place that anytime I've been there, I'm always end up like, because I'm a big tall guy, I don't like to stand in front of people,
Yeah.
and I always end up kind of like up on the stairs.
Oh, those
or like-
stairs.
yeah, it's
Consideration.
I'm huge. I had a guy call me out at a show there too. He's like, my girlfriend can't see, and I'm like, tell her not to stand behind me.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm like, look around
That's
us.
how it goes.
So what kind of advice would you have for somebody in New York? Like, because you guys are definitely like, I'm not going to call you a niche, but you're definitely like a specific taste.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure,
A
for
specific
sure.
flavor of music.
For sure.
And for metal bands, let's say in particular, because that's kind of where people, I'd say you're not entirely metal, but people kind of lump you in there. Where do you go? Where do you go to see shows? Like Vitus is like the metal place. Like that's the place. Are there other places that you kind of branch out into? Not even where you play, but like where do you go to see shows when you go out? Or do you just go see Billy Joel at the Garden? Like
He flies in on a helicopter right here.
that's what I hear. Yeah.
He lands on the top of MSG, and he plays his set, and then gets flown
Yeah.
back to Long Island.
He's too drunk to do anything.
Yeah.
I would be too if I'm playing that shit every fucking night for God knows how long. But I guess he's making like $5 million a week. So what is he worried about?
Yeah, I think he's probably doing okay, I guess.
Yeah, he's fine.
I guess.
Where do you go?
I thought you were gonna ask where would you play shows if you're a band? That would be more. That would.
Either or, because let me see. So seeing a band is a different experience than playing a show. I've actually never played a show in New York. I haven't been in a band in New York. So I know that there's places that bands like to play. So give me the inside baseball there. But also like as a fan, where do you go? And if the answer is just St. Vitus, that's fine. Then just tell me what is it about that place that you like?
Well, in terms of like places to go to see a show, or if I just go by the shows that I've gone and seen this year, and I don't know if that leans more in the direction of they were bigger bands, but I had good experiences at these shows, so I guess it's worth mentioning. Like when I saw Mesthetics at Union Pool last Friday, that was great. It was perfect. It was really good for them, their sound. It was a really good experience. It was crawling with everyone possible by the time I left, but that's fine. I was there too. I was one of them. So I would say that, among all the fallen venues of Williamsburg, I definitely had a good time seeing them at Union Pool. I hope that Giraffe show goes great at Union Pool. We were that weekend. We were supposed to have a gig up in the Catskills that I don't know that it ever materialized. Rocking the Catskills.
Yeah, why
So
not?
who knows? Maybe we'll wind up at it. But nonetheless, aside from that, I saw Bikini Kill 2 nights in a row at the King's Theater when they did a whole like 4 or 5 shows of a whole reunion block. Where is that? King's Theater is on Flatbush Avenue.
Flatbush.
In Brooklyn by like the Parkside Avenue stop on the Q trains by Prospect Park. It's a theater that's been there for, I'm going to guess 100 years. I don't know the exact detail. When you walk in, it's majestic. It fills your eyeballs with a lot of beautiful, and the sound is really cool. I know Paul had told me he saw Tenacious D there, I think, last year, and was singing the praises of the venue. So that's a venue. Obviously, you need to be able to, fill it up. But that seeing Bikini Kill there was great. I had a great experience at King's Theater. I saw Idols at not Terminal 5, because I don't really like Terminal 5. I saw Idols at Brooklyn Steel.
I was gonna say Brooklyn Steel
and
too.
Paul and
yeah.
I saw
Afghan
Wigs at Brooklyn Steel. That's on Frost Street in what is essentially kind of where Williamsburg and Bushwick, I guess, meet.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul and I saw Afghan Wigs at Brooklyn Steel last year, and I saw Idols at Brooklyn Steel this year, and I really liked Brooklyn Steel. I like it's big, but it sounds really good. It was I had a good time at it.
It was a good show.
And then like my favorite of the big venues, and because I guess we have a personal link to that. Not that we have that many personal links to big venues, but I saw Daughters at Warsaw. And Warsaw is a place that's special to Paul and I. One of the first really big, large numbers-wise show we ever played was at Warsaw in 2013, and we remember that date, and it's like a special thing for us. And the sound on stage, as a person playing at Warsaw with this really thick, beautiful wooden stage, was amazing. Yeah. And the sound out in Warsaw when you're a fan. If you're in the wrong spot, it could almost be too loud, too much, But where I was for Daughters, which was just a couple of heads into the middle of everything, I mean, I had a great time at that show. So those are all, I guess, more per se larger scale venues, but they've ones I've actually been to in 2019 that I had a good time at. I think, like I said, Warsaw lives on. I've seen a lot of shows that I really like there. We got a chance to play there. It's its own kind of little ecosystem, like this Polish event house that sells bratwurst. It's just, there's a thing to Warsaw, I think, that you don't get just anywhere else. So I think that's kind of a special venue to see a show, or if you're lucky enough to play one, or if you're a big band who's coming through town and that's just your normal stop, then you should appreciate it, because that's a fun one. But the smaller clubs, I mean,
I would say I was just at Elsewhere. That's kind of a new club that
I want to go there. I want to go there.
It just opened up recently, kind of, right?
Elsewhere is the last 2 years, and it's enormous.
Yeah, it's bigger than I thought it was going to be.
I keep saying it reminds me of an old Christian youth center, right? But they have that amazing glass and whatever, and the sound's always good.
Yep.
You can tell they're trying real hard to be a major player.
Yeah, it was a really good show. I saw Bad Books, which is it's Andy Hull and Kevin Devine. They're two artists that I really like. Andy Hull's from I can't even remember the name of his band right now. What the hell's the name of Andy Hull's band?
Is he the orchestra?
Yeah, Manchester Orchestra. Yeah, but I like Bad Books more than I like Manchester Orchestra, because Bad Books has Kevin Devine, Kevin Devine is from Bay Ridge. He's an awesome singer, songwriter, great guy.
Respect.
Yeah, mad respect to him. But so they were playing there, and they just did an acoustic set, and they packed the place out, and the sound was amazing. I mean, it was just a good vibe there. Well, it didn't. I guess it's a little bit of an older crowd, so maybe it wasn't a lot of young kids, but kind of it reminded me of Le Passion Rouge, but without all the stupid bullshit that happens after a show at Le Passion Rouge happens. The club aspect that kind of just goes down out of nowhere.
The thing is Elsewhere's got a kind of smaller club vibe, but security will come pull your ass out too.
Oh yeah, they kicked us straight out.
Yeah.
They kicked us straight out. Then I'm always looking for one more beer, and that wasn't happening to me that night. We got kicked straight out. And what was that other? I was thinking about the Bell House too. I had seen a couple of shows there, and that's not I wouldn't say that the sound is that great or anything is particularly great about it, but I've seen some shows there, and it seems like it's it has people and has kind of a little bit of a built-in crowd, so it could be a cool place to play or to to go just hang out for a night. And I feel like there was maybe one more. Isn't Lightning Bolt playing a gig soon at some place? Did you see that they're at some place that I've seen the name of the venue?
It definitely went through my feed, and I was like, "Oh, they're coming! Oh, gotta see that!" But
open air.
Yeah, open air. I don't.
Okay, I've not heard of that.
I feel
yet.
Does it say it's in Brooklyn? Does it say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That popped into my head just because I had seen it just maybe probably 2 days, a day or two ago, and I want to go.
So it's almost time to close it out.
Okay,
but I wanted to ask you one last thing, which is, what are you listening to now? Like, what's something that you're like? Because you mentioned Idols before, which, by the way, I've just been playing the hell out of the whole last year.
It's very listenable.
Yes, but so
Very lovable.
So, what's the band like? Give me like a couple recommendations each. Like, what do people just need? Like, you need other people to listen to this music, and it could be old too. It could be something you just discovered, something new. What do people and it's even local? Like, what do people look out for?
Ooh, well, it's
Well, that got me into the Idols recently, which is very nice.
Yeah, Idols is definitely something that, like, it's just very listenable. Both the Brutalism album and the Joy is an Act of Resistance album, the whole thing, they deliver the goods. I definitely, this year, got into that band Daughters I mentioned earlier. They made a really, really great album. I really, really love it a lot. I've listened to King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. I told on myself earlier I want to come out again and tell on myself, I'm into you, King Gizzard. I will not go see you at Central Park because that sounds like a nightmare, but I want to see you live one day with your lizard and your
Is there a
wizard.
gimmick to them? Or do they have like a gimmick?
They're from Australia. Maybe they have two drummers and they I don't know if they record the tape. Everything sounds like it was recorded in 1977. But not in like a bad way, in a good way.
Oh, okay. They just sound like they'd be like Guar or like Ghost or something like that.
They're not.
It's like a much more listenable Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Oh shit! Okay,
With a little tiny hint of like a Zappa-y feeling here and there, maybe, or at least
the name itself evokes the Zappa.
Lauren mentioned Zappa. She was like, "Oh, this stuff's kind of like Zappa." She was like that. But King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, I've been digging a lot. And also, actually, there's a lot of Frank Sinatra on my phone, but I'm not turning anyone out. I'm not turning anyone on to that. Everyone understands what that is. But it's worth mentioning. This really great music writer named Brad Cohen, who's been nice enough to cover us a bunch of times, recently wrote an article about a band called $75 Bill. And I had seen the name over the years in the avant-garde community, I guess, but I had never listened. And I just checked out their new album, I Was Real. And I really want to just mention it because it was really, really great and out there. And I mean, I've really, really feast on Mark Lanigan, anything Mark Lanigan band or Mark Lanigan solo. And I also, I really, really feast on Neil Young. I mean, whether that's he has a brand new live album. He's been putting out a lot of stuff. This Tuscaloosa live. I think it's the band that did the Tonight's the Night album. It's his band he called the Stray Gators. There's a live version of Alabama on this live album.
Yeah.
So those are the things I think that I've been listening to a lot. The Apple Music is a couple of years ago I was in this whole anti-digital, anti-streaming thing. Sure. It was brought upon me by, honestly, it wasn't like, oh, because I'm robbing the artist, or like, look, I've been a starving artist all my life. I'm not really too worried about what 15 cents Eddie Van Halen doesn't have in his pocket. But the point is, I had been a real big fan of the iPod invention. I thought it was the coolest invention of all time. I went through two different iPods. Like I had one of them was an 80 gig and one was like maybe a 60, but they were both filled with like everything. And they both died on me and I hadn't backed either one up. Now, of course, here I am, stupid human, not going with the whole tech thing of backing them up, but they both died. And after the second one died in like 2007, I said, wait. I have hundreds of CDs. I spent all this sweat equity, all this time uploading CDs onto a computer to put them onto an iPod. Like, I'm going to listen a lot to my CDs, And I remember I didn't have an iPod and Paul had an old little Nano. And he's like, you poor man. What are you doing trying to go no iPod? Like, oh, I understand, Ev. You're all hardcore, but Paul gave me a Nano and I put a couple albums on that Nano and I carried it around.
I forgot about that.
But for a while, I got back into collecting compact discs, and that was my main source. And it still is. If you were to come to my apartment, I have like 1,000 CDs out, all in alphabetical order. I mean, I think what they call that nowadays is an idiot, because they're really trying to push CDs as garbage. But the sound quality of the CD, like, is just like kind of right on point for me. Like, and
the sound quality is good too, but there's also something to be said about how you pick your music, right? Mm-hmm. So like when you pick out a CD, you're making a commitment.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas when you're just on like the streaming or whatever, like
pop around.
Pandora is like, Jesus take the wheel.
Yeah.
And then and Spotify, I've noticed, is like you still have a prescribed playlist. Yeah. It's still your iPod, it's just on the cloud. And maybe there's a discovery aspect that you wouldn't have through an iPod. But with a CD, there is that tactile, like, this is what I'm listening to,
Yeah.
and I'm listening to all 8 songs,
Yeah.
and then I'll pick out 8 more, and that is a difference. Like you say, it's not an idiot thing. It's like it's nice to switch up your consumption.
Yeah, I wrote it I wrote that really hard and stuck with that. And then what it was, to be totally honest, another like telling yourself moment. When the most recent album that we had out, the last time we were on your show was in 2017. We had an album called Man Bites Dog come out.
Yep.
And the day that came out, I was interested to see like, well, if no one else in the world's streaming it, maybe one person should. Like I thought I should start streaming. I want to hear.
You can kick it off, get the ball rolling.
Let me be the first person to stream it. So
Sure.
at that point, like I went on my phone and I broke down in 2017, and that's when I put Apple Music on my phone and started to pay the $9.99 a month subscription and make use of it. At first, kind of like feeling a little bit begrudging about the whole thing, and then just giving up over to the tech of today, and moreover the fact that I'm a music lover.
Sure.
I don't want to deny my ear holes music getting into them.
Well, and
So
you need
it's-
that kind of like magic that we're all kind of chasing as music lovers. You're chasing those feelings,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that memory, and it takes you back to the Rolodex of your life, so to speak.
Yeah, so Apple Music has really been, for someone who could talk about physical and hard copy, which I do. I love my Apple Music. I do. I make use of it a lot. I use it on a daily basis. If I read an article that mentions a band's $75 bill and I don't know of it yet, or if I hear about some band that we might have a gig with,
It's right there.
and it's
Yeah.
like for me too. It's like I'll take a look and like, oh, did what label? Did a label put this out? Did they put it out themselves? How does this sound? You know what?
And there's
Drums
something to be
sound
said
like
for
shit. Or-
convenience too, because you can just do it like that in a
Yeah,
second.
yeah. So I do subscribe there and do dig that. I don't know how I kind of got off topic to that.
That's all right.
But
It's all right.
I'm going to hand it over to Paul.
All right, yeah, Paul. Tell me. So, like, what do people need to be listening to now? What's really getting you off right now? But like, what's something that's new that you think people should know about?
Something new that I literally just came out with an album like yesterday, 2 days ago. Is this band called Tupperware Remix Party, TWRP Twerp. Okay. They're kind of got famous off of YouTube, but their whole I'm really into the fact that they're very creative. Like their whole each person has a persona. They're like almost like a modern day Kiss.
Okay.
And their thing is like they're from the 1980s, but also the future.
I
so
see.
they bridge that gap, and but besides the fact that they have, and each person has their own little gimmick. They all claim to be from a different planet.
Sure.
You never see their face. You never know. Nobody knows their names.
So there's definitely like a fun. It's very, very fun.
Right.
It have to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing fun. But the kicker is they're virtuosic musicians. I mean,
Okay.
they're like the bass player, Commander Meouch. He's a fucking ripping bass player, and the drummer too. I mean, he says he was birthed in Phil Collins' toilet. That's
all right.
That's how he quotes his coming into existence. But he's dressed as a robot with the lights coming out of his eyes.
There's definitely a Gore vibe as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But they're like 80s funk, like
All right.
instrumental. But they have like the keyboard player. Anytime they sing, he's got a talk box hooked up to his synth, so he sings, and he pitch corrects his voice on the fly. So I mean, just watching them go at it, and they never use any like samples. Everything is like created live.
Okay.
They're just
Very
amazing,
cool.
amazing musicians. And if you've never seen them, or like they just put out a new album. I don't know what it's called because I listen to it on Spotify.
Sure.
I don't know any of the names of any songs. That's part of the problem with Spotify.
Like the way we forget phone numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. So when when I'm listening to Spotify, I kind of just lose track of what I'm listening to. But so Tupperware Remix Party, TWRP, they're definitely amazing. I always throw on the meters after.
Yeah, that's always a really good, especially
yeah.
for a drummer. That's a
Yeah. As I've gotten older, I've kind of slowed down my approach to drumming. Like when I was younger and first started playing with Ev, like I was very much like Travis Barker's like the best drummer ever. I'm
Sure.
pop punk, and I'm like speeding through fills and speeding up everything. But
Booker T is a good one to go for if you're a big Meters fan as well.
Yeah.
Booker T and the MGs.
I've never listened to that.
Oh, dude, they did Green Onions. That's what they're famous for.
Oh, okay, I gotta check that out.
But like the rest of it's all, they were like a really, they were instrumental. Like there's no singer for that band.
Yeah.
And so that was, they came like Duck Dunn, like whatever. The Blues Brothers band was all like from that band as well.
Wow.
Yeah. it was
I gotta check
amazing
that out
stuff.
for sure. I mean, I'm really into the funk lately. There's a band called Wolfpack.
Yeah, I know Wolfpack. Yeah.
They're another like virtuosic.
Look for another one,
musicians.
Orgon.
Oregon.
Orgone.
Okay.
Very like that same kind of like session band feel. But
What was the
very-
first band? Booker T and the MGs.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, green. Just look up Green Onions and then just go from
Yeah,
there.
man. Hey,
Now,
we're getting your recommendations too.
so yeah, right. So before we go into the pluggables, real quick, in like 2 sentences or less, you guys are native New Yorkers. Why do you love it?
Ooh.
And like keep it like 1 or 2
Yeah, yeah.
sentences. What is it that keeps you here?
Places like Roland Roaster and Brendan Carr, shit like that. Like you probably wouldn't even. I don't know if anybody even knows about that shit, but like the salt of the earth kind of nature.
Yeah.
Of where we grew up in Brooklyn. That's kind of what I live in Bay Ridge, and I still feel that that vibe from where I grew up, and that's kind of what keeps me. We were just talking about this and moving and living in Bay Ridge together. Like that salt of the earth thing kind of is what it's just home. You know?
All right. And Ev, what is it about? What keeps you here?
Yeah, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, it's just everything is here. I've gone lots of places, and everyone wants to come here. And when you are here, you don't really, I think, take it as serious as others do when you go to other places and they realize where you're from. Like, this is really one of the greatest places in the world, New York, Brooklyn, etc. I mean, we have access to everything. It's probably the largest melting pot. We have the most cultures all on top of each other. I mean, it's really a great representation of what America could be like, I think. That all depends on your opinion of things. But, what keeps me here, it's the fact that, it's not easy. I think what keeps me here is that it's you're a part of an equation in flux when you're here.
Well, and you get all the heartbreak, but you get the cream too.
Yeah,
it rises up.
cream.
Yeah, so much cream
like nowhere else.
on the subway, on the sidewalks, cream everywhere. Well, okay, guys, hit me up. This has been Cinema.
Yes.
Evan, Paul, hit me with your pluggables, guys.
Okay. Well, if you wanted to find us on the interweb, like a website, which I know that's very old school for people, as we're just about to probably update our website, but you could find us at cinemaband.com if you like to look at websites. It's got plenty of information. If you're a Facebook person or an Instagram person, then the handle is cinemaband. If you're a Twitter person, it's just cinema. So that's
That one early.
we did get lucky with that one. Good call. What's going on? I mean, we are been led to believe that our episode here may be airing in the fall time, as it currently is the summertime. Yes. I've broken the wall. I'm sorry, everybody.
Recording this in the summer.
That's how it works.
All the leaves are brown.
Leaves are brown in the sky. So anyway, by the time this airs, we should be just on the precipice of a brand new campaign. November 1st, we have an album coming out. November 8th, we leave for a West Coast tour. All those details will probably be really clear and in bright neon colors by the time that we are posting this. So I'll just leave the dots to connect for then. But there is new music that is going into the atmosphere. There is dates. There are shows. There is travel. There is craziness. There is cinema coming at you all the time, like usual. So that's pretty much where we're at.
I concur.
Yes.
All right, well, Cinema. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. Hell yeah.
So that's it from Cinema. Those guys are, I love those guys. They're really cool guys. They're not afraid to explore in their music, but they've got a broad variety of things that they like, and they're not really snobby about music either, which a lot of people in the experimental scene can be kind of like, I don't know, you listen to that, whatever. They listen to everything. They take it all in. They digest it. They spit it out in a very creative way. They've been doing it for over a decade, and it's a family affair, and you got to respect them. Now, the new record, CCXMD, is out right now. It's out on Nefarious Industries Records. They are currently on tour of the West Coast through November. Bigger link is in the show notes for their tour dates, but November 8th, they're at Jerry's Pizza in Bakersfield, California. November 9th at Old Town Pub in Pasadena. November 10th at Jub Jub's Thirst Parlor in Reno. November 11th, El Rio in San Francisco. November 12th at the Ivy Room in Albany, California. November 13th at Sunspace in Shadow Hills, California. November 14th at Zigos Presents in Fresno. November 15th at Rubber Gloves in Denton, Texas. And then November 16th at Tradewind Social Club in Dallas. Check out the album right now on their Bandcamp, CCXMD. And that's it for me this week. Next week, I've got, let's see, I believe it is Greg Hansen of King Pizza Records and the Mad Doctors here in New York. He's been doing a lot of cool stuff. We had a long talk. This is going to be the longest podcast yet. He's a really cool guy, really interesting kind of vibe to him. And his life and just kind of how he came to be where he is very cool. And he knows his way around the New York City rock scene and how to move around and how to get art out there in the world. So make sure that you check that out next week. And then might take a little bit break during the holidays. I'm not going to lie. It's hard to set up interviews with artists, especially during the holiday season, so I am doing my best to just get interesting people to come in and talk to me and kind of so you can get a better picture and a better idea of what it's like in New York City and what it feeds and brings to the people that create art here and just kind of where they come from. And it truly is a melting pot, and I love that about it. So check in next week for Greg Hansen. Make sure you're checking out the new Cinema album. And Freelance Fiends Presents sounds familiar. It is a Freelance Fiends production. It is hosted by me, Adam Shaper, edited by me, everything by me, with the exception of the folks talking to me. And you can check us out on freelancefiends.com. All the archives are up there. The weekly radio show is up there as well. And the podcast is available on iTunes. It's on TuneIn. It's on Google Play. Everywhere where there is a podcast, I'm pretty sure I've got it up there. So check it out. Whatever your flavor of podcasting consumption is, I am happy to do my best to provide it for you. If I'm missing out on something, or if you know somebody that I need to talk to, or you're in a band, or you're an artist, or you're a DJ, or whatever in New York City, and you want to share your experience, hit me up at freelancefiendsnyc@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Twitter at sounds_BK and on Instagram at soundsfamiliarbk. YouTube, Freelance Fiends there as well. And I hope that you enjoyed the show. I hope that you have a great week, and I hope that you can make sense of this crazy world in any small way. And if I can help, well, of course, let me know. My name is Adam. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Sounds Familiar. I'll see you next week.